Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to react to the 2021 Booker Prize long list. We are headed into Book Award season headlong. The Women's Prize winner is coming. The National Book Award long list will be announced fairly soon, so it's an exciting time of year. You may have noticed if you follow along that I'm sitting in my old filming location. This is where I used to sit and do work so I could hang out with the dogs, and I have my buddy Guinness right here. I am back in this location because it is really hot and very smoky where I live right now, so I figured I would spend some time with him. He's feeling a little listless because of all the heat and the smoke, so I just want to try to be here to hang out with him. But that's neither here nor there. It's Booker time, and we're going to talk about that. I am pretty unfamiliar with most of the books that are on this long list, and there's only 1.25 that I have read, and we'll get around to those. But what I have decided to do is go into the descriptions of the books and just kind of react to the plots as they are, without any preconceptions or without listening to other people talk about the long list or without any other people talk about which books they're excited about. So I have not watched any other reaction videos yet. Unfortunately, because of the timing of the announcement, I was unable to film a video until today, and because of my work schedule, I can't really film in the morning. So you're going to be getting this late. It is what it is. I know time is of the essence with reaction videos like this, but you know, this is when I can film it. So it is what it is. Hopefully it will still be exciting or fun for you to follow along as I take a closer look at these titles. Why don't we start with the one that I have read, the one that I am the most familiar with, therefore, Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. If you follow along, you know I read this, and in my mid-year book freakout tag, which I will link down below, I referred to this as my biggest disappointment of the year so far. And the reason I gave it that label is because I had extremely high expectations going into this book because of the two other books by Ishiguro that I have read, and because I heard some really good things about it when it was first released. That set my expectations really sky high, which can be a dangerous thing. And it just didn't live up to them. I am much more of a fan of Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day, which are the other books by Ishiguro that I have read. This one is fine. It just didn't really excite me very much, and I felt like I wanted it to do things other than what it was doing. If you're not familiar with this book, it follows Klara, who is an artificial friend. And through the book, it sort of teases out larger details about how the world around her works and all of that, potential threats of revolution. But to me, they never coalesce into anything with a sense of urgency in the way that they did in Never Let Me Go or The Remains of the Day, because that sort of structure is Ishiguro's strong point. He loves a sort of windy narrative that reveals things about the world and the characters in it, and about us as humans as well through doing all of that. And in this case, I just didn't think there was much of a payoff. So I don't think it's surprising that this book made the long list. I will be disappointed if it gets onto the short list, because personally, I feel like there's room for other books that maybe did things a little bit better. And I'm not saying that because Ishiguro has won the Booker Prize before. I believe it was for The Remains of the Day, but just because I think there's probably a lot better literature out there. And although I've only read a quarter of one of the books on the long list other than this one, I have to believe that there are 5 or 6 books that would be more worthy of the shortlist. And that's something I never really thought I would say about an Ishiguro book, but here we are. The world is weird. Let's jump to the other one that I'm familiar with, which is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. I attempted to listen to this on audio. I can't remember when. I think in May, possibly April. And boy, I didn't get along with it. I kept going back to the beginning because I realized I wasn't paying attention. And I was initially thinking that it was me, and then the third or fourth time I went back to the beginning, I was thinking, it's like, no, I just really am not liking this very much. So I gave up. And I think I only ever made it maybe 30 minutes into the audio, possibly 45 minutes. Definitely not an hour, but somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes is all I got into of the audio. I have had commenters say that they think the book pulls together at the end, but given how little I was enjoying that beginning, I don't know that I would revisit this and try to make it through to the end. So this is another one where, because it's gotten so much praise, I'm not surprised it made the long list, but I would be kind of disappointed if it makes the short list, because given my experience of it, I think there have to be better books that could make the shortlist and that would be worthy of the attention for the shortlist. The premise of it is that it follows this woman who has gained a sort of internet fame for a social media post that she did. And according to the plot description, she loses her grip on what is real and what is fake for the internet, which is an interesting idea. And that's why I wanted to try to listen to this book. But what it actually is in execution is just this loose series of stories. I kind of think of Jenny Awful in the way that she writes, or Jhumpa Lahiri's book Whereabouts, where things kind of jump around and are a little jumbled and you piece together a narrative from them. However, in this case, I just did not think it was working for me. Now let's start going through the other ones. Again, I am admittedly very unfamiliar with most of them. There is at least one other book that I have heard of, but have not looked into very closely. The first one we should talk about is A Passage North by Anuk Arudpragasam. I hope I said that correctly. It is described as a young man's journeys into Sri Lanka's war-torn north in this searing novel of love and the legacy of war from the award-winning author of The Story of a Brief Marriage. A Passage North begins with a message out of the blue, a telephone call informing Krishan that his grandmother's caretaker, Rani, has died in unexpected circumstances, found at the bottom of a well in her village in the north, her neck broken by the fall. The news arrives on the heels of an email from Anjum, an impassioned yet aloof activist he fell in love with 4 years before while living in Delhi, bringing with it the stirring of distant memories and desires. As Christian makes the long journey by train from Colombo into the war-torn northern province for Rani's funeral, so begins an astonishing passage into the heart of a country, at once a luminous meditation on connection and longing and a moving account of the legacy of Sri Lanka's 30-year civil war. This procession to a pyre at the end of the earth lays bare the imprints of an island's past and the distances we bridge in ourselves and those we love. That sounds really interesting. I don't know that I would immediately say I am going to read this and prioritize this. This is something that I will probably keep an ear out for when I start watching the other reaction videos that have been posted and see what people are saying about it. Maybe if it makes the shortlist. I think it sounds interesting, but I don't feel a sense of urgency just based on that. Larger conversations about the book could change my mind. We'll see. The next one is Second Place by Rachel Cusk. I am familiar with Rachel Cusk, although I have not read any of her books. So let's see what this one is about. I've heard kind of mixed things. I know a lot of people were big fans of the Outline trilogy, I believe is what it was called. I have not read it, but I've heard very mixed things. Some people absolutely love that trilogy and consider it very brilliant. Other people seem to think it was kind of overblown. I haven't read it. I can't really say. Let's see what this one is. From the author of the Outline trilogy, a fable of human destiny and decline enacted in a closed system of intimate, fractured relationships. A woman invites a famed artist to visit the remote coastal region where she lives in the belief that his vision will penetrate the mystery of her life and landscape. His provocative presence provides the frame for a study of female fate and male privilege, of the geometries of human relationships, and of the struggle to live morally in the intersecting spaces of our internal and external worlds. With its examination of the possibility that art can both save and destroy us, Rachel Cusk's Second Place is deeply affirming of the human soul while grappling with its darkest demons. That sounds interesting. Based on feedback I've heard from Cusk's other books, I think, again, this is something that I'm going to try to check out the discourse on, see what people who have read it are saying, people who are doing their own reactions to the long list are saying about it. But it sounds like it ticks a couple of boxes that interest me. That idea of female fate, male privilege, and the part about affirming the human soul while grappling with its darkest demons. That sounds really interesting to me. So that is potentially one that I would be interested in. If you told me to choose between this one and a passage north, I'd probably pick this one up first. Again, sight unseen, without any additional feedback. Once I hear more, that might change. But just based off of these descriptions, I would gravitate toward the Cusk. Let's see how the rest of it goes, though. The next one is The Promise by Damon Galgut, a modern saga that could only have come from South Africa, written in gorgeous prose by the Booker Prize shortlisted author Damon Galgut. Now, I am unfamiliar with Damon Galgut, but it says shortlisted, which makes me think that's something from the past. So I'm gonna have to dig to see which one would have been shortlisted for the Booker Prize before, because I just don't know. Haunted by an unmet promise, the Swart family loses touch after the death of their matriarch. Adrift, the lives of the three siblings move separately through the uncharted waters of South Africa. Anton, the golden boy who bitterly resents his life's unfulfilled promises, Astrid, whose beauty is her power, and the youngest, Amor, whose life is shaped by a nebulous feeling of guilt. Reunited by 4 funerals over 3 decades, the dwindling family reflects that the atmosphere of its country, an atmosphere of resentment, renewal, and ultimately hope. The Promise is an epic drama that unfurls against the unrelenting march of national history, sure to please current fans and attract many new ones. That sounds interesting as well. I don't know anything about Damon Galgut. I am curious to explore African literature a little bit more. I've only dabbled here and there in it, so this could be a good way to do that. The plot sounds good. Again, I feel like I want to check out the discourse and see what other people are saying before committing to it. But now, of the 3, based on description alone, I feel like this is the one that I would be most inclined to just pick up and read. The next one is The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris. In the spirit of the known world and the Underground Railroad. That's intriguing. I tend to be suspicious when a debut author in particular is compared to an established book or author that I like, because I feel like it's always ends up being a bit of a reach. But those are 2 really good comparisons. I haven't read The Known World yet, but I've heard so many really good things and really want to get around to it, especially since it is part of my Pulitzer Prize project. Anyway, in the spirit of the known world and the Underground Railroad, a profound debut about the unlikely bond between 2 freed men who are brothers and the Georgia farmer whose alliance will alter their lives and his forever. In the waning days of the Civil War, brothers Prentice and Landry, freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, seek refuge on the homestead of George Walker and his wife, Isabel. The Walkers, racked by the loss of their only son to the war, hire the brothers to work their farm, hoping through an unexpected friendship to staunch their grief. Prentice and Landry, meanwhile, plan to save money for the journey north and a chance to reunite with their mother, who was sold away when they were boys. Parallel to their story runs a forbidden romance between 2 Confederate soldiers. The young men, recently returned from the war to the town of Old Ox, hold their trysts in the woods, but when their secret is discovered, the resulting chaos, including a murder, unleashes convulsive repercussions on the entire community. In the aftermath of so much toil, it is Isabel who emerges as an unlikely leader, proffering a healing vision for the land and for the newly free citizens of Old Ox. With candor and sympathy, debut novelist Nathan Harris creates an unforgettable cast of characters depicting Georgia in the violent crucible of Reconstruction. Equal parts beauty and terror, as gripping as it is moving, The Sweetness of Water is an epic whose grandeur locates humanity and love amidst the most harrowing circumstances. That is something that catches my interest, and I probably would not wait for more discourse. I feel like I'm going to check my library right now to see if there's a copy. It sounds like Gone with the Wind, which I'm reading right now, in that it is about Reconstruction, and The Prophets, which I liked significantly more than I am liking Gone with the Wind, in addition to, I guess, The Known World and Underground Railroad. Like, that, to me, I'm going to leave this page open so I can try to see if I can get a copy of this somewhere, because that sounds intriguing to me. The next one is called An Island by Karen Jennings. Samuel has lived alone for a long time. One morning he finds the sea has brought someone to offer companionship and to threaten his solitude. A young refugee washes up unconscious on the beach of a small island uninhabited by no one but Samuel, an old lighthouse keeper. Unsettled, Samuel is soon swept up in memories of his former life on the mainland, a life that saw his country suffer under colonizers, then fight for independence only to fall under the rule of a cruel dictator. And he recalls his own part in its history. In this new man's presence, he begins to consider, as he did in his youth, what it is meant by land and whom it should belong To what lengths will a person go in order to ensure that what is theirs will not be taken from them? A novel about guilt and fear, friendship and rejection, about the meaning of home. Oh, I am not sure about that one. Of all of the ones so far, I'd probably rank that the lowest. But again, I'm leaving room to see what the discourse at large would say about this book. Maybe that would change my mind, but right off of the description, it doesn't sound like something that I would feel much of a sense of urgency to get to. So I'm probably going to be letting that one go. The next one is A Town Called Solace by Mary Lawson. Mary Lawson, acclaimed for digging into the wilderness of the human heart, is back after almost a decade with a fresh and timely novel that is different in subject but just as emotional and atmospheric as her beloved early work. As A Town Called Solace opens, we meet a family in crisis. Their rebellious teenage daughter, Rose, has disappeared. Weeks have passed with no word, but still Rose's little sister, Klara, keeps a daily vigil at the living room window, hoping that Rose will come back. Feisty and fierce, Klara is not only missing Rose, she is also missing her elderly friend and next-door neighbor, Mrs. Orchard, a retired schoolteacher who is away in hospital. While standing at the window, Klara keeps an eye out for Rose and an eye on Mrs. Orchard's house. Then one afternoon, a strange young man in a strange car pulls into Mrs. Orchard's driveway and proceeds to move into the house as if he owns the place. Which it turns out he does. Mrs. Orchard has died and left it to him. Soon we discover that Clara's beloved Mrs. Orchard has a complicated and tragic past, and the real mystery at the heart of this novel is what happened between her and Liam, the man in the car. A Town Called Solace is told in 3 distinct, compelling voices: Clara's, Mrs. Orchard's, and Liam's, cutting back and forth to carefully uncover the layers of grief and remorse and love that connect families, both the ones we're born into and the ones we choose, and steadily building towards an assured, heart-wrenching, and, despite its losses, uplifting ending. A beautifully written, masterful, suspenseful, and deeply humane story by one of our great storytellers. That actually sounds interesting. I don't know that I want to commit to it until I've heard some opinions from people who have read it. So I'm probably going to hold off on it. But I think I would rank that underneath The Sweetness of Water. But still, I'm going to hold off and see what other people are saying about it, because it ticks some boxes. I love family secrets and chosen family versus blood family and all of that stuff. So it ticks a couple of my boxes. I just want to make sure the tone is something that I would respond to, because it sounds like it could have potential to be a little bit melodramatic and maybe emotionally manipulative, and I would want to make sure that it is not those things before I would seek it out. Next is The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohamed. The story of a murder, a miscarriage of justice, and a man too innocent for his times. Mahmoud Matin is a fixture in Cardiff's Tiger Bay, 1952, which bustles with Somali and West Indian sailors, Maltese businessmen, and Jewish families. He is a father, chancer, petty criminal. He is a smooth talker with rakish charm and an eye for a good game. He is many things, but he is not a murderer. So when a shopkeeper is brutally killed and all eyes fall on him, Mahmoud isn't too worried. Since his Welsh wife, Laura, kicked him out for racking up debts, he has wandered the streets more often, and there are witnesses who allegedly saw him enter the shop that night. But Mahmoud has escaped worse scrapes, and he is innocent in this country where justice is served. Love lends him immunity too, the fierce love of Laura, who forgives him his gambling in a heartbeat, and his children. It is only in the run-up to the trial, as the prospect of returning home dwindles, that it will dawn on Mahmoud that he is in a fight for his life, against conspiracy, prejudice, and cruelty, and that the truth might not be enough to save him. That sounds really interesting as well. That's another one that I'm going to be leaving open so I can check to see if it's available either through my library or a subscription app like Libby or Scribd. So that sounds interesting. We found 2 so far that I will be seeking out. Again, completely based on plot description. I have not read reviews. I haven't seen other people talking about these books. I could very well end up not interested in them, just like some of the ones that I'm saying I might not be interested in. I could end up very excited about. Next, we have Bewilderment by Richard Powers. All right, so I had a sort of aborted attempt to read The Overstory, which was his Pulitzer Prize winner, and I probably need to get back to that to finish it for my Pulitzer Prize project, but that will be another thing. So that's where I stand with Richard Powers right now, going into this plot description. The astrobiologist Theo Byrne searches for life throughout the cosmos while single-handedly raising his unusual 9-year-old Robin following the death of his wife. Robin is a warm, kind boy who spends hours painting elaborate pictures of endangered animals. He's also about to be expelled from 3rd grade for smashing his friend in the face. As his son grows more troubled, Theo hopes to keep him off psychoactive drugs. He learns of an experimental neurofeedback treatment to bolster Robin's emotional control, one that involves training the boy on the recorded patterns of his mother's brain. With its soaring descriptions of the natural world, its tantalizing vision of life beyond, and its account of a father and son's ferocious love, Bewilderment marks Richard Powers' most intimate and moving novel. At its heart lies the question, how can we tell our children the truth about this beautiful, imperiled planet? That doesn't convince me, really, to rethink my stance on Richard Powers. By the way, this one is not released yet. It is going to be published September 21st, 2021. And maybe discourse will change my mind about this book, and I'll give it a shot. Maybe if it makes the shortlist, I will think about it a little bit differently. But just based on that, I would probably take a pass. So that takes us to China Room by Sunjeev Sahota. A multi-generational novel of love, oppression, trauma, and the pursuit of freedom, inspired in part by the author's own family history. China Room twines together the stories of a woman and a man separated by more than a half-century, but united by blood. Mehar, a young bride in rural 1929 Punjab, is trying to discover the identity of her new husband. She and her sisters-in-law, married to 3 brothers in a single ceremony, spend their days hard at work in the family's China Room, sequestered from contact with the men. When Mehar develops a theory as to which of them is hers, a passion is ignited that will put more than one life at risk. The spiraling around Mehar's story is that of a young man who in 1999 travels from England to the now deserted farm, its China Room, locked and barred. In enforced flight from the traumas of his adolescence, his experiences of addiction, racism, and estrangement from the culture of his birth, he spends a summer in painful contemplation and recovery before finally finding the strength to return home. That sounds like another one that I'm going to leave this tab open and see if it's available anywhere, because it sounds pretty interesting to me. Now we get to Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, and this is one that I am familiar with, but I haven't looked too closely in, if I'm being honest. Spanning Prohibition-era Montana, Montana! Okay, it's got my interest already because I live in Montana, so there you go. Spanning Prohibition-era Montana, the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, New Zealand, wartime London, and modern-day Los Angeles, Great Circle tells the unforgettable story of a daredevil female aviator determined to chart her own course in life at any cost. Well, that's a lot of locations, so I wonder how much time it actually spends in Montana, but we'll see. After being rescued as infants from a sinking ocean liner in 1914, Marion and Jamie Graves are raised by their dissolute uncle in Missoula, Montana. That's where I live. So you can probably tell I'm really inclined to immediately seek this book out. Is that shallow? I don't know. There aren't a whole lot of books set here. There's a river runs through it, and not many more. There, after encountering a pair of barnstorming pilots passing through town in beat-up biplanes, Marion commences her lifelong love affair with flight. At 15, she drops out of school and finds an unexpected and dangerous patron in a wealthy bootlegger who provides a plane and subsidizes her lessons, an arrangement that will haunt her for the rest of her life, even as it allows her to fulfill her destiny, circumnavigating the globe by flying over the North and South Poles. A century later, Hadley Baxter is cast to play Marion in a film that centers on Marion's disappearance in Antarctica. Vibrant, canny, disgusted with the claustrophobia of Hollywood, Hadley is eager to redefine herself after a romantic film franchise has imprisoned her in the grip of cult celebrity. Her immersion into the character of Marion unfolds thrillingly alongside Marion's own story as the two women's fates and their hunger for self-determination in vastly different geographies and times collide. Epic and emotional, meticulously researched and gloriously told, Great Circle is a monumental work of art and a tremendous leap forward for the prodigiously gifted Maggie Shipstead. So everything in the plot description bears out the initial interest that I had just based on one location in which this book is set. So I'm going to leave this tab open and see if I can find this book anywhere else. And that takes us to what I believe is our final book, Like Perpetual by Frances Spufford, or Spufford. I don't know which. I apologize. From the critically acclaimed and award-winning author of Golden Hill, a mesmerizing and boldly inventive novel tracing the infinite possibilities of 5 lives in the bustling neighborhoods of 20th century London. Lunchtime on a Saturday, 1944, the Woolworths of Bexford High Street in southeast London receive a delivery of aluminum saucepans. A crowd gathers to see the first new metal in ages. After all, everything's been melted down for the war effort. An instant later, the crowd is gone, incinerated. Among the shoppers were 5 young children. Who were they? What futures did they lose? This brilliantly constructed novel lets an alternative reel of time run, imagining the life arcs of these 5 souls as they lived through the extraordinary, unimaginable changes of the bustling immensity of 20th century London. Their intimate everyday dramas as sons and daughters, spouses, parents, grandparents, as the separated and the remarried, the bereaved, through decades of social, sexual, and technological transformation, as bus conductors and landlords, as swindlers and teachers, patients and inmates, days of personal triumphs and disasters, of second chances and redemption. Ingenious and profound, full of warmth and beauty, Light Perpetual illuminates the shapes of experience, the extraordinariness of the ordinary, the mysteries of memory and expectation, and the preciousness of life. I'm going to dig a little more, but I'm going to leave this tab open because that sounds like it could be really interesting depending on how it's handled. Because again, that feels like something that could be a little bit melodramatic or manipulative. A lot would depend on the execution. I mean, a lot depends on execution in anything, but it sounds interesting to me. So let's see, how many tabs did I leave open? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that these are the 5 that I hope make it into the shortlist. And they are Light Perpetual by Francis Spufford or Spufford, Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, China Room by Sunjeev Sahota, The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohamed, and The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris. And of the rest, I mean, there are a couple that I would like to see in, but again, I'm probably rooting against Kazuo Ishiguro and Patricia Lockwood, and that feels mean and hateful. But I would also love to hear what you think of this shortlist. I don't know if I'm as excited by this shortlist as I was by last year's, at least not on a first pass. We'll see how this develops. But I would love to hear what you think of this shortlist. Which one are you excited about? Which one do you think should be left off the list? What do you want to make the shortlist and what do you want to win if you have an opinion this early? And are you going to read the whole long list? I will not. But if you are, please let me know about it in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.